So, welcome everyone to the first SHAC seminar of 2024, a series that we set up during the pandemic, and we've been continuing every other month since then. We're live on Zoom, and it's also been streamed on YouTube. So, could everybody, apart from me and Sharon at the moment, mute themselves, and Sharon will talk for about 30 minutes, and then we'll have 30 minutes or so of discussion. So far as the discussion is concerned, those people on Zoom, if you so indicate in the chat box that you want to ask a question, I'll call you when it happens. Those of you on YouTube, if you could put your question into YouTube, that would then pass to me, and I will ask it on your behalf. So one sort of slight quirks of this what we're doing here. So this month's seminar will be given by Professor Sharon Ruston, someone whom I have worked with for an awfully long time, I have to say. She's chair in Romanticism and at the Department of English Literature and Creative Writing at Lancaster University, has published numerous books such as The Science of Life and Death in Frankenstein, which came out about 3 years ago, Creating Romanticism, Romanticism and Introduction, Shelley and Vitality. She co-edited the collected letters of Humphrey Davy, published by Oxford University Press in 2020. And we have been working, she has been working as the PI for the AHRC funded project to transcribe all of Humphrey Davy's notebooks. And that's what she's going to talk about today, the Davy Notebook Project. Over to you, Sharon.
Thank you very much, Frank. So yes, I'm going to talk about the Davy Notebooks Project, a large-scale transcription project, which Frank and I have been part of, and which is close to completion. So for the past few years, we have enlisted the help of members of the public across the globe to transcribe Davy's notebooks held in the Royal Institution and in Cornwall. Including the pilot project, the whole thing has taken 4 years, and with the help of 3,473 volunteers to date, we have transcribed more than 11,471 pages of Davy's notebooks. I'll first tell you about the project, how we went about it, the decisions we took, the results we gained, where we are now. I'll focus on the joys and the pitfalls of these kind of large crowdsourcing projects. And I know that a lot of people here will know an awful lot already about Humphrey Davy. So while I will organise, here he is, in fact, while I will organise the second part of my talk chronologically, offering some key biographical details, I'm going to focus on what we see in the notebooks at these key important moments of his life. And I need to say from the outset that this paper has been written with the help of the whole project team. So that's Eleanor Bird, Sam Blicken, Frank James, Andrew Lacey, Joe Taylor, not to mention the thousands of volunteers who have helped with the transcriptions themselves and much more besides. So we used a platform called Zooniverse, the world's largest platform for crowdsourced research. Since it was created in 2009, they have launched more than 450 projects. The range of the projects that they run is impressive, from identifying astronomical phenomena, cancer cells, or the behaviour of wildlife. And they have more than 2.6 million volunteers registered as users. So while they may have started with science projects, I think they started with astronomy, they have become to do more arts and humanities style projects. But as I understand it, we were the largest transcription project that Zooniverse had undertaken when we joined with them. And as part of our partnership with them, we were able to develop some of their tools, which have subsequently been rolled out to other projects that came after us. So here you can see our website on the Zooniverse project. So the platform relies on what they call citizen scientists, members of the public who provide the people power that's needed for huge research projects, or another word of which is crowdsourcing. So to start, there's a police car outside. I hope you can't hear that. To start with the pilot project and how we got the money. We've always been quite highly successful in capturing grant money, and I thought it might be interesting for people to hear a little bit about how we went about this. So initially I had a AHRC Leadership Fellowship, awful title as they were known then, to give me time and research assistance to complete the Davy Letters edition, which Frank mentioned. And as part of that, I was mentored by Sally Shuttleworth, who had worked with Zooniverse for her Constructing Scientific Communities project. I'd always wanted to transcribe Davy's notebooks since my PhD when I first looked at them and realised what a treasure trove of material was there. As part of the HRC Letters Award, we ran a free online course with FutureLearn, which I used to disseminate some of the findings coming out of the Letters project, but also to test the waters for the public's appetite for transcribing Davy's handwriting and generally whether there was interest in more Davy. And the evidence that we gained from that was excellent. Thousands of people signed up for the course. We were able to see where they came from and a little bit of the demographic. So we had then a good sense of our audience and gained some wonderful feedback that I could use in the next funding application. So you can ask quite leading questions in things like this, such as even, would you be interested in transcribing Davy's notebooks, which is one of the questions that I asked. It's a good way as well to find out about the impact of the project and how people think if it's had an impact on them. I applied for and gained a AHRC follow-on funding award to do a pilot crowdsourcing notebook transcription project, aiming to transcribe 5 of Davy's notebooks over the course of a few months. This project was built using only the project builder tools on the Zooniverse site, so what's there for anyone to use at any time. Andrew Lacey, our senior research associate, did all of this himself. In the event, we couldn't keep up with the success of the pilot project. Notebooks were being transcribed in mere days. So Andrew remembers having to upload another notebook while he was at a wedding reception on a Saturday afternoon because it had been transcribed far more quickly than anyone expected it to be. It was a huge success. I mean, over the course of 19 days, 500 transcribers transcribed 626 pages of Davy's notebooks. And on our best day, a day in late July 2019, we gathered over 330 classifications, and a classification is a line of a notebook. So we even put up 3 additional notebooks, extra to what we wanted to do, and they were transcribed too in the time that we had. But people particularly enjoyed the mix of science and poetry that they found in Davy's notebooks. What we hadn't realised was how important the use of the talk message board would become on the site. This is how we communicate with the volunteers and how they talk to each other. Volunteers were keen to find out about the things that they had transcribed and to share any knowledge that they had. So Sam Blicken, one of the project team, has written about this in an article for a special issue that we've recently submitted to Notes and Records of the Royal Society. She recalls that within a few weeks of the pilot project starting, one volunteer shared this experience of conducting additional research to confirm their transcription of a place name that they'd read in one of the notebooks. I'll just read this out loud. So this is the volunteer writing on the talk message board about something they've just transcribed. I was trying to confirm my reading of the river name Orr, A-W-E, and it looks like it is the River Orr in Scotland. I searched online and found multiple references from the 1800s of geologists mentioning the porphyry there, including Davy and a geology lecture. The post included links to the Wikipedia article for the River Orr and to a Google Books search result for the collected works of Sir Humphrey Davy, Volume 8, published in 1840. So this was really interesting to us that they were keen on doing this kind of work. When we surveyed people at the end of the project, 95% said they had enjoyed the work and would like to do some more. We discovered that our transcriber demographic was predominantly over 65 years old, almost half of whom had a postgraduate degree. We had teachers, medical professionals, librarians, civil servants, industrial chemists, and many more contribute to the project. And each transcriber obviously brought their own particular skill set and expertise. So I was able to use this information in a major grant proposal to the HRC, and we asked for 3 years to transcribe the whole of Davy notebooks, all of them, and were awarded £1 million for that. And I should say immediately that the vast majority of that money went on staffing costs. We did also plan a few events, a conference, an exhibition, which is currently at the Wordsworth Trust in Grasmere, and some research trips to the Royal Institution. But in the main, the money paid for 3 full-time research associates to work on the project for 3 years. Last thing on this, the volunteers were only able to use 3 text modifiers when they were transcribing. I'll explain this a bit more, show you an example in a second. So they could click on a button and say that a word was unclear, or that it was deleted, or was an insertion. We found that that was quite limiting, just those 3. And at that time too, in the pilot project, Zooniverse could only deliver pages to the volunteers randomly. So you didn't know what you were getting next. You didn't have there was no consecutive order to the pages you were given. And we had loads of negative feedback about that from the volunteers, which is perfectly understandable, I think. When you're transcribing a page, you want to continue to find out what the outcome is, what's the next bit of it. And it's also easier and more satisfying to transcribe a page when you know what's gone before, because it kind of obviously follows on. Sometimes it takes you a few pages to understand what Davy is going on about, or what that word is that you can't quite transcribe, and it takes you a couple of times of seeing it until you work out what it is. So as part of the larger grant proposal, we paid for Zooniverse to develop some tools that enabled pages to be transcribed consecutively. We also increased the number of text modifiers that people could identify, and we added underline, superscript, and ampersand, all of which Davy routinely used. And as I said before, these are all tools that now other projects can use on Zooniverse when they launch there. So the full project launched in the summer of 2021, which, as you may remember, was an odd time when we were all locked down at home, and lots of us anyway, and our volunteer demographic was were particularly understandably worried about going outside or socialising. We found that our project we've surveyed people since, that our project helped relieve people from feelings of loneliness and isolation. One person said that it helped them to avoid burnout at work. Yet another said they thought transcription was a good activity for mindfulness and relaxation. And in general, people talked about the sense of community that they, quote, felt when working on the project during my isolated working from home lifestyle. So kind of crazily, in some ways, I think we benefited from lockdown at that point. And there were other reasons why we did not benefit from lockdown, some really obvious ones. But that was interesting that it was kind of the right moment at the right time for that kind of project. We found that interest dropped off as the years went by, and we always knew that was going to happen. We were prepared for that, having heard that it was a common thing in large-scale, lengthy projects. But from the outset, we endeavoured to create a community of people working on it, the volunteers, and we continue to do that. All of our participants have spoken about their enjoyment of being part of something bigger and contributing to, as one put it, quote, something historic. Obviously, I couldn't say that myself, but I could quote a volunteer saying that about the project. So I have been, and I continue to be, bowled over by the expertise and willingness to help of our volunteers. So this slide shows you the transcription task as it was. So you would have a page of text on the screen, and you needed to draw a line under the line that you were going to transcribe. So you start there, you can see, and that green line is the line that you've drawn, and a box would appear, and you would write in there what you thought the line said. And you can see there the text modifiers you've got there. So you can click on those, and it will add tags around a word or a phrase to say that they're unclear or underlined or whatever. We're trying to replicate as much as possible Davy's text, so any spelling mistakes, etc., are not corrected but transcribed as they appear on the page for a diplomatic transcription. At the beginning of the project, we asked for 3 volunteers to transcribe every line of text. So each line was transcribed 3 times by 3 different people. We lowered this in the final year, partly because we were running out of time, but we were also by then assured of the quality of the transcription that was being generated. We have some excellent transcribers. And in any case, everything is being checked. So we're currently in our second pass through the whole corpus, where the RAs and me are kind of going through and checking everything. But back then, when we were asking for 3 transcriptions per line, if you were the second or third person transcribing the line, you'd be offered the transcription of the person who'd gone before you to see whether you agreed or disagreed with their interpretation. We would then use a Zooniverse tool called Alice. This is what it looks like. Alice stands for Aggregated Line Inspector and Collaborative Editor. This would show the project team the page image and the aggregated lines. You can see a consensus score, hopefully, on the right-hand side. This told us how much agreement there had been between the volunteers. So you see 4 out of 4, 3.1 out of 4, 3.7 out of 4. But in any case, we went through line by line. So you would look at the line, look at the aggregated line, see what you thought. If you didn't agree, you'd click in it and you'd see the other, what everyone had said that line was. I'll show you that in a second. Yes, so you can see here, if we've edited a line, it says edited in there. So you can see just on this page, we've edited 4 lines there, tweaked or changed them more profoundly. So on this slide, you can see what I'm talking about. If you were to click into a line, you here see 3 different volunteers. We know them by their usernames. So Dihar and AliCat54 are 2 people that have stayed with us from beginning to end. So they've had a go at transcribing the line, and then you see the aggregated transcription at the bottom there. And I might as well note that, you know, the anachronistic spelling there of enveloped with 2 L's. So that's what we were looking at. So we're often asked why we chose to crowdsource rather than use an optical recognition tool, which I know other projects are doing. And we discussed this from the very beginning. Sam Blicken and others have demonstrated that the quality of base text produced by collaborative transcription is higher than that produced by individual transcription, even by an expert transcriber. By conducting an A/B comparison of collaborative versus individual transcription of a test set of pages, the collaborative group produced work of a higher quality than the individual expert transcriber, as this graph demonstrates. Each coloured line represents an individual transcribed page, and the x-axis, the horizontal one, shows the character error rate in transcription. So you can see here that the individual error spread is larger for the individual than it is for the collaborative group. But this is only one reason why we chose this method. I mean, maybe the main one, I suppose, but working with the volunteers has been the bit of the project that I have enjoyed the most. The project has emphasised collaboration from day one, not only in the fact that university researchers are collaborating with members of the public to produce these transcriptions, but volunteers also talked about how much they enjoyed collaborating with each other. For example, one told us, quote, "It always felt like a collaborative shared experience. You could make comments or read those others had made. You felt the presence of the researchers and other volunteers involved in the project." We were always very careful to present what Zooniverse calls a mutually rewarding offer. So you're not just exploiting the volunteers for their time. We spend time with the volunteers. We had lots of online and in-person events with them. We correspond with them frequently. We ask their advice and we involve them in the project's progress. And we have now quite a community with some fantastic volunteers who continue to spend lots of their time with us, helping us to reach the finish line. So this is the talk board that I've mentioned already, the message board, how we communicate with them and how they communicate with each other. Since the project began, there have been 3,000 threads started on this message board and over 8,000 comments, each on a particular page that was being transcribed. From the beginning, volunteers have been encouraged to research the things they found while transcribing, such as people, places, chemical elements or processes, reading that Davy mentioned, or anything that they were interested in, anything of interest. And we're using this information for the annotations that will accompany the text and image of the notebook page. And so far, we have a database of 3,000 entries. So I'm going to call what we produce a crowdsourced edition. I truly believe it's been kind of produced not just by the project team, but also with the volunteers throughout. The only problem with the volunteers' notes that we've been getting is that they're unevenly distributed. So that's why we're again going through with this final pass to check that whether there are other notes that are needed. That might be a longer process as well. But we continue to ask the volunteers for help when if we don't immediately know the answer to the question of what Davy is talking about, we'll often go to the volunteers to ask them for their help. Some of them are great Davy experts now as well. So I had a quick look at talk today to see what was going on. I can see discussions of a word that we're finding it difficult to decipher that seems to be a place name where there are rocks like those at Giant's Causeway. The identification of John Lubbock as Ghazari's banker, and some discussion of who the Bard of Provence might be. We're stuck on that one, actually, if anyone knows the answer. It might have something to do with Petrarch, but we're not sure. So if anyone here would be keen to help us with these and any of the queries that we're still getting at the minute, we'd be very grateful for the help. So you just would need to go on to the Davy Notebooks project on Zooniverse and the talk pages, and there are lots of these kinds of questions that are coming up. So again, the research team then verifies the notes when we've got them before writing them up and tagging them, making sure that Davy's sometimes very odd spellings are accommodated. And Frank, for example, has been doing an amazing job going through our persons database and improving the descriptions that we'll give for each of those. So this is where we are right now, just over halfway through our final pass through the notebooks, proofing the transcription, adding notes where needed. In the coming months, they will be published on the Lancaster Digital Collections. If you're used to the Cambridge Digital Collections or Manchester Digital Collections, it's the same kind of setup. So this shows you here what our homepage will look like. And here you can see what it will look like when you're inside the notebook. You've got a high quality image there of the page with the transcription next to it. And then here you can see some phrases that will have notes. So you'll hover over them and the note will appear. If it's a place, you'll have a Google Maps reference to show you where that is. We have such a stunning variety of expertise among our volunteers that they have recently been helping us translate from Greek, Latin, Slovenian, and even phonetically transcribed German, finding Davy's sources in philosophy, chemistry, books of the period and books of earlier periods. And we're making real discoveries about what Davy knew and read even now. Just to give you one example, we had a sketch of this bridge in a notebook. Davy had sketched this. Here's the bridge. And there was nothing on it to tell us where this was, what he was sketching. But a volunteer recognised it as the Carrick Reed Bridge in Northern Ireland. And then we could confirm that with other evidence given in the notebooks themselves. Notebook itself. Davy's notebooks contain all manner of things, scientific discoveries, but also reading lists, shopping lists, gossip about his contemporaries, philosophical musings, and the list goes on. There are hundreds of poems written in a variety of forms, many on the topics that you'd expect for the times, such as poems written about the Lake District or on Mont Blanc, poems composed since his childhood in Cornwall until his death. And while we'd known for a long time that Davy had written poetry, we did not know the extent of it. You may have seen that article that came out in the Observer about that on New Year's Eve, which is very nice to read. So, hang on a second. So now I'm going to follow a chronology of the key moments in Davy's life and tell you about some of the notebook finds that shed new light on those moments. So, as many of you will know, Davy was born 17th of December in Penzance, 1778, and was first apprenticed as an apothecary surgeon, but then he wrote this essay on light, heat, and the combinations of light, which brought him to the attention of Thomas Beddoes, the radical physician, who offered him the position of superintendent of the Medical Pneumatic Institution, at Clifton, near Bristol. And at Bristol, he's part of a circle that includes poets Robert Southey, Samuel Taylor Coleridge, and the institution was set up specifically to test the efficacy of gases as medical treatments. On 20th of April 1799, Davy breathed nitrous oxide, which had been thought to be fatal before then, and he found that it had euphoric properties. You will perhaps have seen the gas canisters littering parks in recent years. In December last year, possession of nitrous oxide was made a criminal offence. It's very topical, this. He publishes his book on the subject, Researches Chemical and Philosophical, which did contain lots of accounts, Coleridge's and Southey's and others in the book of what it was like to take nitrous oxide. But the notebooks really contain an awful lot more material. So in the notebooks, he records when he takes the gas, in which quantities, how it makes him feel. He also writes when under the influence of nitrous oxide. So, for example, he describes himself as feeling like a sublime being in one of his notebooks. This is one of my favourites. On December 23, I breathed after a terrible drunken fit a larger quantity of gas, 2 bags and 2 bags of oxygen. It made me sick. Another here when he's off his head on nitrous oxide, and you wonder who he's writing this to, because of course he's writing in a notebook, but he still crosses something out and rewrites it. So it says, I originally said cried out, then we have said to myself, I was born to benefit the world by my great talents. Davy's arrogance there can also be seen in a notebook entry, one of our favourites, which reads in very large writing, Davy and Newton. And if you can read what's underneath, he writes, the feeling produced by breathing about 7 quarts of nitrous phos oxide mingled with 7 of atmospheric air was indeed most delightful. Davy also wrote a poem about the effects of the gas in his notebook, which you can see there, halfway down the page. But as time wore on, nitrous oxide became an embarrassment. Here's a cartoon, it's supposed to be poets composing under the influence of nitrous oxide, and Davy moved on to other and greater things. He attracted the attention of Joseph Banks in London, and in 1801, aged 22, he went to the Royal Institution to take up a position there, and by the age of 23, was Professor of Chemistry there. And his big break came in 1807, when he isolated potassium, as he later named it, and shortly after sodium, using the new science of electrochemistry. He was knighted by the Prince Regent in 1812. He also married the wealthy widow Jane Priest in that year. I'm sad to say that her wealth came from slavery plantations in Antigua, and one of our research associates, Eleanor Bird, has been looking into Davy's attitude to race and transatlantic slavery as part of our project. His marriage enabled him to give up the day job, so he delivered his final lecture at the Royal Institution. But from then on, he would continue to undertake scientific projects that interested him, but was always careful to present these as a gentlemanly pursuit and nothing to do with money. Here we have the Royal Institution in Albemarle Street, still standing there now, where Davy had lectured to adoring crowds, many of them women, which is very interesting. And we have lecture notes in the notebooks, which Frank has done a wonderful job of looking at the evidence for these in his Notes and Records article. And he plans to compile a list of all of Davy's lectures, some 280 in total, which will accompany our special issue. It was a real thrill when volunteers identified the notebook page where Davy first isolated potassium. You have a sense of the moment itself, a first-hand witness account of an important moment in history. We know that Davy was incredibly excited when he made this discovery. He danced around the room in ecstatic delight. Here you can see one of the pages where he's working out what to call the new elements that he's found. And we didn't realise that he had toyed with different endings of the word. Frank tells me that this is very important for the chemical property. Before deciding on ium, there was sodacium, I can't say it, Batakium as well. And in the middle of these pages, we found an address in London, which turned out to be a tailor's shop. And so the research associates thought that Davy may well have been considering buying a new suit because he'd realised the importance of what he discovered and that he would be needing to announce it to the world while looking very sharp. Later in 1815, following yet another horrific mining accident, Davy was asked whether he could do something to come up with help, and he, working with Michael Faraday in the RI laboratory, came out with a miner's safety lamp made of wire gauze. And there was a terrible, nasty priority dispute with George Stephenson over this. And you probably know that Stephenson's lamp was the one that is often kind of referred to in the Northeast. They called their lamp the Geordie, not the Davy lamp. So one of the evidence in the notebook, which is quite interesting, is that he wrote a poem about this in the notebook, which the title of which gives you a sense of his feelings on the subject. So he titled the poem "Thought After the Ingratitude of the Northumbrians with Respect to the Safety Lamp." So often then the notebooks do give you a sense of the man himself, warts and all, an intimate and personal account of his thoughts and feelings. This is the end of Davy's life here. Is some successes and some failures. One failure was the Navy Board attempt to protect the copper bottoms, though Davy never really got over that and believed that he had been unsuccessful, but he wrote a poem about that too. So there we are. I'm going to end then with this resolution, which we find in a notebook from his Bristol days. This you can see is a kind of what we all do in notebooks, because he's kind of working out what to do with his working day. Incredibly ambitious here. He's going to work for 2 hours on his poem, Lover of Nature, or The Feelings of Eldon, from 6 till 8 in the morning. Then 9 till 2 in experiments. Then 4 till 6 reading. And 7 till 10 on a metaphysical system. So he's not going to have a break even at night to do that. And I was quite interested in, does the working on the poem in the morning meaning he's got to do that before his proper working day starts, which is the scientific stuff which he's being paid for? Or does it mean that it's the thing he likes most and he enjoys doing it? It's when his brain is at its most active, and so he wants to do it in the morning. Very, very last slide here. This is one I love. We know that this was a notebook, again, kept in Bristol, that Coleridge had read. It's a poem that Davy writes, because Coleridge writes a letter to Davy saying, oh, that word isn't, and he says it's if you see where the number 3 is, the word impressible there, you can see from the manuscript it originally said impressive. And in a letter that Coleridge writes to Davy, he says, that's not good English, the word impressive. What you mean is the word impressible. And we can see that Davy has overwritten impressive with impressible. So clearly choosing the word that Coleridge favoured and changes his poem accordingly. So that's very interesting to me, particularly. So I've only given a few highlights of the notebooks here. There are many other things that I could have chosen. In many ways, the publications of these notebooks online is only the beginning. We will have a searchable corpus then that researchers can do their own work on and make lots more discoveries. I'm planning to publish the first ever selected edition of Davy's poetry with Greg Tate, and I'm excited about that. There are lots more events planned and the project is not yet complete. I do hope that you might have a look at Zooniverse and help us with some of those queries. Thank you for listening, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Sharon. That was a really super trot through the project. So gives everybody an idea of what's involved and what we're finding. I'll wave my usual chair's right to the first question, and because Tillman's got his hand up instantly. So Tillman, Sharon, can you sort of stop sharing screen so everybody can see?
How do I do that? Let's have a look. Sorry, I'm not very good with this. Oh, here we are. Stop share. It's on the other screen.
There we are. Good. Tillman.
Hello. Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
All right. Hi, Sharon. Nice to meet you. I don't think we've met in real life yet. I have a question. I mean, first of all, what a fascinating, wonderful community fostering project. I have some experience with collaborative transcription at the Making and Knowing project, but the crowd was much smaller and not sort of volunteer based. But I have a question about the data output. So the volunteers all get sent to Zooniverse, and then they transcribe, and they have those options to use text modifiers. So how does the data then land on your desk? In what form? Especially if you use a data modifier, how does that come through, so to speak? Is that like an XML tag around
Yes,
those words? Is that the form in
yes,
which it
yes,
ends up with you? And how do you then feed that into a publication?
yes. I mean, you're asking me technical questions, and this is not my area, I have to say. But I have kind of seen it happen. So, and I've worked on Alice. So Alice is the kind of intermediary stage where we get the transcriptions come through on Alice. We kind of we that's and we kind of confirm them there. Then they're exported from there. They can be exported to all different kind of formats like CSV and all sorts of things.
Okay.
But what we get is a kind of we tend to use a much more simple form. Then they've already got the tags around them for the text modifiers. But in order to tag the other things, I don't know if you're asking about this as well, but the annotations, we're creating an auto tagging list. So we've got these databases of persons, places, miscellaneous, other work, that kind of thing. And that will tag onto the word when it comes up. Is this answering your question?
Yeah, no, that's great. I mean, the main thing is really in what form the data comes out. If that's XML, then that's useful to know for people wanting to use
Yes.
Zooniverse. Thank you.
All right, hang on a minute. Tim's got a question. Tim?
Hello, I'm emerging. Hi, Sharon. Hi, Frank. My question was just, Sharon, would you like to tell us a little bit more about the poetry? Sounds exciting, and sort of where it is in the notebook. So, have you found any interesting juxtapositions of verse with other material?
Yeah, I mean, yes. So because we're trying to write a proposal for this edition now, so this is kind of interesting to think about. And we think that there is poetry in about half of the notebooks. So there are some notebooks that don't have any poetry. I mean, there was a whole series of notebooks on, say, agricultural chemistry, where he's obviously writing that book, and so he's kind of really focused on that. There are also notebooks where it's entirely poetry. There's sort of notebooks where poor Michael Faraday has had to copy out Davy's poems, and the whole notebook is made up of that. And the other thing we found really interesting, there's a blog post that's just come out, I think this week, about it, is that we're finding other hands in the poetry. So we found Catherine Fanshawe, who was a poet at the time, some of her poems in Davy's notebooks, and some of Davy's poems in her hand in his notebooks. So that's all really interesting.
Mm.
But I mean, we've all been sort of speculating on what was going on there.
Uh-huh.
But but it's really good to kind of get to identify the hand, because quite often we're not being able to identify handwriting and stuff like that. But definitely we're confident of that match. The other thing that's we've found definitely a few examples of is that he's writing poetry in the middle of science. So like you can tell, for example, there's a page I keep thinking about where he's definitely in the lab because the page is really torn and burned and it's got stains all over it, and he's writing about his nitrous oxide, and then he writes a couple of lines of poems in the middle of that. So I'm very interested in that kind of poetry in proximity to scientific work. So sometimes you'll start a notebook with poetry, go from front to back, turn it around, and then go back to front with science. But sometimes it's just on the same page. So yeah, that's what I've kind of been writing about recently.
When they did editions of Emily Dickinson's poetry, which she used to write on the back of envelopes and any back of pieces of paper she happened to have, that they kind of, and she just wrote masses, they had to sort of cut things to make poems, and some scholars kind of suggested since that she didn't necessarily always write discrete little poems, that it was actually a longer thing, not really meant to be cut up. Any problems of that kind of thing with Davy's poems? Are they very obviously separate poems, or
No, I mean,
do
no,
you sometimes not know?
yeah, how to decide when a poem is going to be a difficult
Mm.
question. That's one of the reasons why we have decided to do a select edition rather than a complete edition, because there just would be lots of lines of nothingness if you did the complete one. And, and you wouldn't know whether, is this like a version of this, or is it, so we're kind of interested in poems that seem to have a completeness about them.
Yeah, so it's very much a working notebook. So lots
Yeah.
of them, yeah. Yeah, interesting. Ta.
Okay, John Christian, then Nick Wyatt. John.
Thanks, Frank, and hi, Sharon. There's so much to talk about in what you've said. I'd like to ask a question about evidence to do with Davy's character as emanating from the forms and the content of the transcription. And I have a very specific reason for asking it, and that's a fairly recent article by my old friend and colleague Geoffrey Cantor, which I think is in Notes and Records, where he reaches a very firm conclusion about Davy's narcissism, basically, using contemporary, i.e. contemporary to us, accounts and definitions of it. And I have to say, I thought the evidence lined up really rather neatly. And I was wondering if transcription evidence can sort of endorse that, or in some senses modify it even. That's the question generally. Does that make any sense, Sharon?
It does. And I know Geoffrey's article, and in fact, he was a reader for the letters that Tim and I co-edited.
Oh, right, yeah.
I mean, then there's just loads of evidence for Davy's narcissism in the notebooks, and I mean, we have a reading group that meets every month, and we choose a notebook, and I think that's pretty much, we talk about something like that every week, every time we meet, because so it's just, and it's really interesting because who is he writing for at this point? He's writing a notebook. So did he, I mean, obviously he kept them, and he never, he didn't burn them like Byron burned lots of stuff, which makes you wonder what was in there. So it's really interesting, but it's unbelievably self-aggrandizing and kind of, I mean, the little bits that I showed then about the nitrous oxide, that stuff like that, but not always written just on under the influence. And again, the poems are quite like that. So there's a poem written about the copper bottom thing, where he's very angry and very resentful and thinks it's all everyone else's fault apart from himself. So yeah, so there's lots of evidence of Davy's not very nice character in the notebook.
And is the ingratitude poem a bit like that as well?
Yeah.
It is.
Yeah.
Because that was a very striking title.
Yes. I know. It's very funny. I mean, it's kind of like, I mean, I know you should be careful with these things, but having done the letters, having read lots of his published stuff, I feel like in the notebooks you get a kind of different angle again. You really do get a sense of what he thought, even though that's Davy, warts and all, and we wouldn't necessarily want to know he was like that, but we do know he's like that because of the notebooks and the evidence in there.
That's wonderful. Thanks, Sharon. Thanks so much.
If I could make a couple of comments on that. I mean, Davy was never one to accept blame for anything that went wrong, and lots of things did go wrong with him. And as for his sort of narcissism, Sharon showed the quotation of Davy after inhaling 7 liters of nitrous oxide, saying, "Davy and Newton, note the word order." Nick.
Thank you very much, and it's a great project. So congratulations for that. I have a minor question, because we have a lot of archives in the Science Museum that would so much benefit from the same sort of treatment. but and I've done some transcription myself, not on this project, but family records. But what do you have any examples whether there are any did he write sketch anything in the and how you deal with drawings that he would have included in the notebooks? And the other thing that I've come across with other archives is writing at 90 degrees. Do you have a modifier for that? The other thing that I found in family history, because of the lack of paper at the time, was writing upside down between the lines as well. So are there any examples like that in the Davy?
There's a bit. I mean, there's actually not too much, which is quite good. So, and we won't be able to show that in the transcription bit. We basically took a decision that would just show, it would just kind of be linear. But you've got the page image, you know, so people will be able to see what it actually looks like. I mean, we're already causing lots of headaches for the Lancaster Digital Collections with trying to what we want to do with the thing. And with sketches, there's lots of sketches, and there's watercolor sketches and all sorts of things. It's going to be difficult. We may never be able to 100% attribute all of them to Davy, but he definitely did. He did a lot of sketching, like you can tell. And
it's where you've got something where you've got a text and then you've got a little sketch within the middle.
Yeah, lots of that, yeah. So I mean, that basically all that would have in the transcript. You'll have the page image, you'll see it. You'll have the transcription. It will just have a square bracket saying sketch of something or other, so that hopefully it can be picked up in a search. Not all sketches we can tell what they're of, and you know, it might say sketch of chemical instruments or something like that, really vague. But we're trying our best, and that's just, there's more work to be done there. You know, I just keep thinking, you know, it could go on forever, couldn't it? But and the more, what we want is for people, when the notebooks go up, there'll be like a little icon that you can click on, and you can tell us if there's something on the page that you know about it that we can then add, or a new note we can write, or if something's wrong, if we've got an incorrect note or anything like that. And that, so hopefully, you know, we'll get to a more perfect thing eventually.
Thank you. Well, it's pretty great at the moment.
Thank you, Nick. So Herb Baldry says that their connection is low, so has written the question: did you think about using HTR at least before launching the project? I'm afraid to say I don't quite know what HTR stands for.
I don't know, something recognition maybe? Anyone know? Is it one of these optical recognition things? Yeah, so we did. I mean, I did
handwritten text recognition.
Yeah, I did kind of touch on that a little bit. And so Sam Blicken, who's a project lead at Zooniverse, is one of our co-investigators. And she had done that work where I had the graph up. She kind of did some work where she looked at the accuracy of a group transcribing some pages and an expert individual transcribing, and what the conclusions that she came to was that there was more error in the one person doing it themselves, even if they were what's called gold standard, an expert on the handwriting. And I'm quite interested in that, because actually I like the idea of collaboration being at the heart of all of this, and that everyone has helped everyone else, and actually some of the volunteers are better than I am now with this. They're amazing. They astound me every day. They've really got to grips with it. And there's one volunteer who is a working physicist, and he's German first language, and he said, I just sort of chanced upon this, and I've realized I'm really good at transcribing early 19th century handwriting. And just like, you know, like it's kind of a skill that he realized he had, and he hadn't ever known before. And he's one of our best. He's absolutely brilliant. And you might go through life not knowing you have these amazing skills.
Frank, can I follow up on this, or is there somebody else?
Yeah.
Lovely, thank you. So I suspect that Hervé was asking something that I also meant to ask. So I'll just come back with this. I think he was referring to software-based transcription. So where there's no, where the human is involved in training a machine learning system rather than doing all of the transcription by hand. Did you consider that as an alternative as well?
Transcribers was around at the time, and I know that the Lyle project, we've talked a lot with them when they started theirs up about doing it. And I think it was about the fact that we wanted to use volunteers and to have I mean, that's the way Zooniverse works as well, isn't it? That it's crowdsourcing. And so we kind of, I think that was such an important part of the project that we organized it that way. So there would be events, there would be, lots of kind of add-on things that we'd be doing as well. And we wouldn't have done that if we'd have gone the other route.
Yeah.
It would have been cheaper, maybe, but probably not that much cheaper, because it's the as I said, the main cost is the RA time, and you still would have needed a lot of that to go down that route.
Yes, well, somebody has to train the AI in the first place, and the quality stands and falls with the quality of that transcription. Speaking of, did you how much training and in what form do you give your volunteers? Because I mean, it's not the worst worst hand in the world, right? It's quite readable, but I imagine still they need some training.
Yes, well, you can still see it on Zooniverse. If you go on there now, there's like a field guide, there's a tutorial, and we kept adding to the field guide. So Davy just has some idiosyncratic things that he does, like his D's and that long S and stuff, things like that. So we would just add to it whenever a new query came up, when someone was saying, "Oh, I've noticed this," we would so this would get longer and longer, and also people just kept talking to each other and saying, this, I've noticed this word, this is this, something that would take them a long time to work out, and it would help the next people come along who were doing it.
Lovely, thank you.
Rob, you had your hand up just now.
Yes, I was vaguely wondering on the theme of handwriting recognition that we talked about very briefly earlier. There was a school of thought around psychologists recommending that people get analyze people's handwriting to get an assessment of the individual's character. Has there been any thought of trying to do that on Davy's notebooks?
Well, we haven't done that, but that's a new project that could be done, isn't it? Yeah, well, we're not sick to death of Davy right now, but yeah, I mean, that's a lovely idea. I like it.
John.
You gave us a bit of information, Sharon, quite early on that indicated that all your transcribers, added up, they're a pretty well-educated bunch. My assumption was that they are mostly British. But is it also the case that you have people from continental Europe, from America, and so on and so forth, i.e. the geographical range of it?
Yeah. Then I don't know that they are mainly British. That's really interesting.
Okay, yeah.
And so the two that I just mentioned recently that were ones that stay with us from the beginning, one is Danish and the other is German. I think we've got lots of Europeans and Americans, yes, as well. So and when we have the online we've had sort of various thank you events. It's really interesting because you only know them through the username, so you don't know anything about this person, and weirdly you kind of in your head have decided what they like. You kind of have this idea of who the person is, and then they're completely different to what you expect when you meet them, and they've been wonderful. Yeah, so yeah, I wouldn't say. I don't know if I'll ever find out that, because that's not something that's being captured, is where they're. But we have done it before. When we had the pilot project, we did a survey, and the online course, as I mentioned, the online course was mainly British, and then kind of maybe 25% elsewhere. And but we also have had people from further flung away as well. Yeah. And it's interesting because transcription seems to be a thing that people can do when it well, even if it's not your first language.
Yes,
Yeah.
that was my immediate thought. What about the language issue? If you say compare it to some of the other kind of Zooniverse projects, where I mean, you're just looking for animals in Africa or stars or whatever, and there's no, as it were, language inhibition there. But it's very interesting what you say. You know, it isn't necessarily an inhibition. Yeah. So thanks. Yeah.
And also, just I mentioned this, but he writes in lots of languages that we hadn't realised he would be writing in. So he's actually, I think Frank and I have both been quite shocked by just how the knowledge that Davy has of kind of ancient philosophy and all sorts of things. But so you're more Greek and Latin than we were expecting. But also one thing I realised he did do, because I had to do the notes of this in the letters, was he'll hear it when he's in Slovenia. He will hear a place name in German, and he'll phonetically transcribe it into the letters or notebooks, and you have to work out what that word is that he's saying.
Yeah.
But I had there's one of the volunteers who said to me, oh, I can do all the Slav languages, and then someone else said, oh, I can, someone else was German. So actually it's just now I kind of know if I've got a particular query, I know someone who will be able to answer that query.
Oh, brilliant. Yes.
It's so much better than just it being me, which obviously wouldn't be able to do all of these things at all. So yeah, it's great.
Oh, that's wonderful. Thank you, Sharon.
Okay, so with that, I think I'll draw proceedings to an end. The next seminar in this series will be on the 21st of March, when Robert Fox will be talking about Thomas Garnett, and hopefully I'll be able to wave a copy of his new biography of Garnett around. If you want to hear more about Davy, there are a couple of events that are coming up that Sharon and I are participating in. On the 25th of January, which is next week, at Words of Grasmere at 7:30, there's a webinar with me, Sharon, and Sarah Cole, who's a student of Sharon's at the University of Lancaster. We'll be talking more about Davy's notebooks. And then on the 13th of March, the Royal Society of Chemistry Historical Group is running a one-day meeting on chemists' notebooks. And Sharon will be talking about Davy, and I'll be talking about Faraday for Change, just to sort of remind me what Faraday got up to. If you want to sort of access more details for the Wordsworth one, just type Wordsworth Grasmere into Google and it'll come up. If you want to do Royal Society of Chemistry one, then I think you need to type Royal Society of Chemistry Historical Group Notebooks Meeting, and it'll sort of appear in the sort of top four. It's just one of those things. And so it just remains for me to thank everybody who's involved. There's quite a sort of production team behind putting on these seminars, and particularly today, Rob Johnson and Becky Martin, but with lots of aid from Anna Simmons, Caroline Cobbold, Chris Campbell, and Joe Henderson. And it just remains for me finally to thank Sharon for giving us such a wonderful seminar, which provoked such a really interesting discussion. So thank you, Sharon. And enjoy the rest of the day or evening, depending where you are in the globe. Okay, thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.